Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of LA Sessions. And today I am joined by Dr. Lori Williams. Thank you for coming, Doc.
My pleasure, Ryan. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And, we kind of had our initial meet and greet through a mutual colleague, a mutual friend, because I really needed somebody to interview at the time because as some of our viewers know, I'm like putting the finishing touches on the first of hopefully many novels in a series that I have where the protagonist is a psychologist and me being a lowly LMFT, I really wanted to get authenticity. I didn't want to be someone who just wrote about like this fictional fantastic character, which I think would be cool, but I just made shit up as I went. And so, we had met and you gave me a lot of great insights. And I just wanted to thank you for that. A lot of it's going to make it on into the book. So I'm definitely
Awesome.
grateful.
Yeah,
Yes.
happy to help in any way I can.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. But along the way, I know we had talked about this podcast and just kind of went over some topics with you. And it turns out that there was something that you talked to me about that I had no real connection with in terms of mental health, and that was like music, pop culture. And so I thought, we both thought like, hey, why not? Let's bring it onto this podcast. But before we get started, can you just do a quick intro for our viewers, and also just how did you get started in psychology?
Oh, well, that's kind of an interesting story, I guess. So yeah, I've been working in the mental health field for, I couldn't even tell you, to be honest. It feels like I've been doing it my whole life. But I got really interested in the field of psychology actually from watching a cartoon when I was a child. I couldn't even tell you exactly how old I was, but there was this really popular cartoon called Animaniacs. And it was just about these three, I don't know if they're dogs, cats, or whatever, just little creatures that would run around. They were like little menaces to society. And they were actually talking to a psychiatrist at the time, and his name was Dr. Scratch and Sniff. And so what would end up happening is these things would go wreak havoc all over Warner Brothers Studios. And Dr. Scratch and Sniff would try to talk to them and, try to get them to calm down and behave in a more, I don't know, socially acceptable way, I guess. Would
Yeah.
listen to their problems and, really tried to help. And I remember just being a little kid and thinking he had the coolest job in the world. So that kind of set me on my path towards psychology. And, I work at a community college as a psychologist slash academic advisor. I work at another university as a psychologist, and I'm in private practice too. Um, so I really like diversity. I like to keep my interests varied. I kind of do a little bit of everything. But yeah, it was really Dr. Scratch and Sniff that kind of set me on this path.
I'm assuming though that you haven't had was it Yakko, Wacko, and Dot actually come in for therapy just yet.
Unfortunately, not. Still waiting, but they
I
have
don't
not
know.
shown up yet.
I don't know if that would be really, really cool or really, really like overwhelming. Because as someone who fondly remembers that show as well, yeah, I don't know if I'd want to.
Yeah.
Wacko is a
Yeah.
little,
In
little crazy.
retrospect, yeah, I mean, in retrospect, Dr. Scratch and Sniff did go bald as a result of his interactions with them. So it's probably for the best that I haven't worked with the Animaniacs. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought that they had such a cool job. And it's interesting because, you and I had talked about the importance of pop culture. And, for my generation, sounding like your generation, I don't think we're too far off anyway. But that was like
Let's
such
just
a
go
big,
with that. Yeah.
yeah, that's such a big moment in pop culture. It was like a really popular cartoon at the time. Clearly, it influenced me. Um, so I think, pop culture does have a lot to do with the way that people are kind of shaped and their interests, the way they develop and all of that.
Yeah, for sure. And whether it's cartoons, whether it's comic books, I have to imagine, for example, like right now with this generation, they're probably very, very influenced by not comic books necessarily, but comic book movies, for example. Like they
Hmm.
want to be entrepreneurs like Tony Stark and Iron Man, or they might want to join the military because of Captain America, or something like that. And you're right. I mean, back then it was cartoons, like whether it was Animaniacs, Looney Tunes, uh, the Batman cartoon. I have to imagine people wanted to, men probably wanted to be psychologists because of what's that character in a Batman cartoon, Hugo Strange, which probably not a good thing. because he was a bad guy. But
Right.
yeah, it's a
Harley Quinn, I
strong.
think, was a psychiatrist
She
too.
was. She was.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Also, probably not a good thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The whole dual roles thing, probably an ethical violation right there with the Joker. But
Right.
yeah, but you got to wear a cool costume. But yeah, I mean, so that was, I had never really made that link. Even though like it's hard to not be tied to pop culture. Different generations, there's different stuff. But the more I thought about it, for example, like I mean, I'll tie it to another thing. For example, where like there were certain male characters, for example, growing up that really resonated with me, and it made its way into my writing. For example,
Hmm.
as a kid in the '80s, I really liked Don Johnson in Miami Vice, and like it's not even unconsciously, like it's like really overt. It just made its way into a lot of like screenplays that I used to write. It made its way into like this novel that I'm writing, things like that. And then it's kind of thought, well, after our conversation, I was like, well, you know what? It kind of made its way into my therapy life. I mean, it's not a secret that like our whole LA Sessions podcast here is very 80s themed. The only thing missing is I'm not driving a Ferrari Testarossa or any Ferrari for that matter. I've got a miniature somewhere. And then I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. There is that connection, and that's on a professional level. And so I have to
Right.
imagine that it could be kind of harnessed, if you will, in the implementation of mental health, right? And so, yeah, let's talk about that. I'd like to hear your insights on just music, and for example, as one form of pop culture, and how it can apply to our field.
Oh, absolutely. And I think for me, I'm such a huge music fan just in general. Both my parents actually worked in the music industry, so some of my earliest memories are just being at concerts right up in the front row. I was like 5 years old. I don't know why a parent would have a 5 year old at a concert, on a Tuesday or something. But those are some of my earliest memories being backstage. So I always kind of grew up with music around me. And so I've always been a big fan. Most people that know me know that my heart, right, my passion is Backstreet Boys. That's what I grew up with. Um, and so it was always kind of separate. And I think, similar to kind of what you described, is a lot of people don't realize when they're a big fan of something, necessarily how that can bleed into other aspects and other areas of your life because it's so prevalent. You don't really think too much about it. To you, it's just kind of like, oh, it's something that I like. It's fun. But it can definitely influence your identity development, even the things that you pursue, the things that you're drawn to. So for me, that happened to be music. And, it became my passion. I always say I'm a consumer of music, right? Because people always seem to ask, like, oh, well, do you play any instruments? I definitely do not. I wish I did. Um, but, I'm a big consumer of music and I've brought it into my work professionally as well because music is something that so many people connect with. I actually looked at a study when I was working on my dissertation many, many, many moons ago, and they said only 2% of the population does not like music. So that means 98% of humans do like music, right? Which makes sense, because how could you not? But
So
anyway,
is that 2% of the population is deaf or what?
that's a good question. I don't think that included like hard of hearing. Um, I'm not totally sure, to be honest. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm reflecting on it, even people who are hard of hearing, they may not necessarily be able to hear the music the way that you and I traditionally might, but they can still feel the vibration a lot of times.
That's
Um,
actually, all kidding aside. That's what because I watch the UFC a lot, and that there was this deaf fighter, Matt Hamill. That's what he
mm,
said actually, because he used to come out to Bruce Springsteen, and
oh, wow.
people would joke and say that's like the dumbest thing ever. But he says, no, I could feel the vibrations like through my feet and everything, and
Yeah.
that's what gets me going. And so I was like, yeah. So all kidding aside, deaf community, don't make me write a letter. But yeah, that is so interesting. You say 2%, considering there's like a genre for like every personality. So that's
Hmm.
so weird to me. I mean, I would understand if you said something like, I like '90s hip hop versus today's, but you still have
Also
that.
accurate.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not writing a letter to the modern hip hop community on that one though. That's a hill I will die on.
I'll be right there with you. I get it.
Yeah, it'll be our last stand. Although to be
basically.
fair, I don't know what I would be scared of. '90s hip hop artists and that culture was actually so much more lethal than today's. Today, they'll fight you through litigation. They're not going to actually come at you with violence. So, yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Anyway,
Let's hope.
yeah. But yeah, no, you bring up a good point. I mean, with something like any walk of life, any job you have where there's like a 98% success rate in engaging somebody with a particular tool, you kind of would think why that isn't more widely implemented, you know?
Mhm. Absolutely. And I know that's something I do quite a bit in my work, even with my own clients, is we will bring in music. We'll talk about music. We talk about how it can apply to their life. Um, I think one of the biggest benefits is that if we look at lyrics of a song, right? And, a lot of people do kind of internalize their emotions or have a hard time expressing them, which can feel very isolating. And sometimes, if they listen to just the right song with just the right lyrics, it can feel like someone resonates with whatever it is they're going through, right? Someone understands it. They're not alone. There's some songwriter, some band, somebody out there who gets it or who got it. And that can reduce some feelings of loneliness. So I bring that into my work with my clients, and we'll listen to music, we'll discuss the impact it has had on their life, how it applies to their current stressors or current situation. It can be very healing.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I feel like there's like this paradoxical view on, for example, what you're talking about. Let's say someone's depressed from, I don't know, like a breakup, going through grief, whatever the case may be. But you always see, for example, in movies, when that happens, they always play a song that is kind of fits that mood. It's also kind of sad. But I mean, I think people on the outside looking in might say, well, why are you trying to like drown in sadness and grief, right? By listening to that. But what you're saying, it seems like, is when you're going through this kind of grief, you're sometimes you're at a loss, literally and figuratively, where you feel like nobody understands you. But by resonating with certain lyrics that really speak to you, then you feel heard. Does that sound about accurate?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think also sometimes, when people are in certain emotional states and comfortable, or what we, traditionally consider negative, though the way I look at it, they're not necessarily negative. They're reasonable responses to whatever is going on, right? But if someone is in this emotional state, where they are feeling uncomfortable feelings, let's just say, right? Sometimes listening to music that matches that mood can feel very validating. The other thing is sometimes people aren't just they're not ready to move past that mood just yet. They have to, sit with their emotions a little bit. Um, so being able to listen to a song that kind of matches that tone, matches that mood, like I said, can feel very validating. Um, and it can kind of bring those emotions more to the surface, which actually can make it easier to move past because that person is no longer suppressing those emotions, ideally. So it does have its place. I understand that, a lot of people are like, oh, if you're feeling sad, why are you listening to sad music? You're only making the sadness worse. But the truth is, if you're acknowledging that sadness, that's actually a good thing. There's also value to the other side, listening to upbeat music when you're not feeling great. You're more likely to pull yourself out of that emotional state, but not everybody's ready to do that so quickly. So there's value in that for sure.
Yeah, it seems like the way you're describing it, like whether you listen to music that kind of it's like, again, to someone on the outside looking in, it might look like you're staying in sadness, but then it's more like this recognition of like this acceptance, if you will. And then if you listen to more upbeat music that's more in line with like moving forward, then it's, you're moving forward like beyond that, you're getting out of that grief cycle. But it that seems to go in line with the whole with Kubler-Ross cycle of grief. And so
Hmm.
it's the music acts as a sort of like guide, if you will, from the sounds of it,
Hmm.
if you use it that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's really cool. I mean, and I never really thought about that until you made that kind of connection. And like,
Hmm.
because I think of it in other ways, like for example, sometimes when I need creativity, I'll listen to certain music that I think, because I have like a cinematic mind. I was like a movie buff growing up, and I have a lot of my writing trainings actually as a screenwriter. But I always have in my head like certain scenes you think of some of your favorite movies, and there's always like a cool song playing, but you remember that song for that movie, right? And
Mhm.
then you realize how well that guided it. And then I would always listen to music, and then it would actually like spark more creativity in me. Like for example, I'm like writing this novel series, which writing a novel is very hard enough as it is when you're trained as a screenwriter. I mean, I won't get into it, but holy crap, it's different. I've been listening to a lot of U2, as I've always been a fan of theirs, and it has really, really like made me see things that weren't even there. Because what you
Mhm.
said earlier, I'm actually analyzing the lyrics. Before I just listened to the music, I focused on the tune and Bono's voice, but I really looked at the lyrics, and I was like, damn, that's really deep. I think I could go somewhere else with this character, and it's actually made me write stuff that I initially didn't see. So it
Mhm.
acted as this catalyst, and for that I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I have to imagine uh, it helps in so many things that aren't just about like repairing yourself. It could be positive things. It could be an very optimistic kind of tool for in my case, sparking creativity. Or I think another example, right, is going to the gym. I mean, I have friends that listen to death metal when they lift, and it really helps them. But
Yep.
then I also know some people that listen to like softer stuff when they're doing like treadmill or something like that. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, well, anything beats the actual music they play at the gym. So yeah,
Depends on the gym you go to, I think.
yeah, I don't, not the
No,
ones
I
I've
mean,
been to.
but you do bring up a good point, and I like that you describe music as a tool because I often tell my clients music can be used for a purpose. It's not always just about listening and enjoying, although that is a purpose in and of itself. You can use it to enhance motivation, enhance creativity, and you bring up the gym, and it's interesting because there actually have been studies done on that people who listen to upbeat music while they're working out do tend to work out harder and lose more weight than people who don't and have just do it kind of like dry, so to speak, without any sort of musical accompaniment. So yeah, there's real truth to that. And when we're talking about the emotional states, you actually just reminded me when you're talking about the whole U2 thing, which I love U2 by the way. But there's this quote, I can't remember who said it or where I stumbled across it. I might even butcher it a little bit, but I can't take credit for it. And I thought it was wonderful. And something you said just reminded me of it. And it's something along the lines of, when you're happy, you listen to the melody, but when you're sad, you understand the lyrics. And I thought that was really cool because I feel like, I mean, it's not always true. Sometimes people just listen to lyrics because they like to, present company included. Um, but yeah, I think when we do start paying attention to the lyrics a little more, sometimes it can spark some new insights that you might have not considered otherwise.
Yeah, I would say there's some truth to that. I mean, I remember back in the day, for example, I would just listen sometimes to Death Cab for Cutie. And boy, when I went through a really bad breakup, yes, I would listen to it repeatedly, but I'd look at the lyrics, and maybe that's when you have a different appreciation, if you will, for it. But it's for what you said, what we're talking about, where it suddenly resonated differently. It hit a
Yep.
little bit differently. It wasn't entertainment anymore. It was
Right.
validation. And Coldplay, I think it's the same thing, And so yeah, because I remember looking back now. I mean, I guess I feel like it's those things I thought about, but I feel like the way you said it's like you codified it, where it's like, okay, actually, yeah, I do make that distinction now, but it was so unconscious before,
Hmm.
you know? It's like,
Because we don't think about it.
yeah, I mean, I swear, like as a kid, well, I'm really gonna date myself on this one, but like you get a cassette, with the album, and then like it has all the lyrics on it. You read it, you never really notice it,
Mhm.
it's just like whatever. But when you need to, you go back to the lyrics, and you're just like, wow, it like you say, it you resonate with it. It's a sort of validation, but when you need it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, it's just entertainment. It's something you sing along with in karaoke or whatever, but you never really think about it. It's like
Right.
in our field, right? Sometimes we say like there's what's said, but then are you actually hearing what's being said? Are you actively
Right.
listening for it, or are you just kind of listening to listen or waiting for your turn to talk or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
this is something a little deeper.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, it can really be used for communication too. When we talk about what's being said, I think about my own experiences almost also potentially going to date myself here a little bit too. But for me, it was Linkin Park, which is interesting because I think people usually think that's where they don't also think Linkin Park.
No.
But I was a huge Linkin Park fan, still am. Actually, Chester Bennington's loss was such a huge blow to me. It was just awful, awful. But anyway, the reason that it was so, that band in particular was so important to me is because I grew up in the type of family where anger is not expressed. Like, you're not allowed to be angry. Like, life is great, everything's wonderful, and you just move on. Like, anger is not a safe emotion to express. We don't go there, we don't talk about it, everything's fine. So, the first time that I would hear something from Linkin Park, um, I can't even remember off the top of my head what was the first song that I heard from them. I listened to the lyrics and I was like, wait a minute, like, this is okay to say out loud? And it was just such a transformational experience for me that, okay, I thought that these feelings were wrong. These thoughts were wrong. You're not supposed to feel this way. Yet here's this guy like screaming into his microphone about it. And he's basically putting into words all the thoughts, all the feelings I've been having that I haven't been allowed to share with anyone. So in a way, it almost became like my outlet. And it wasn't just about, okay, someone gets it. It's someone put my thoughts into words. And I thought that that was just so amazing and also confusing in a way. Because I think I was like a teenager or something. So, emotions weren't exactly at the top of my priority list, and forget about emotional expression, right? Um, so I think music can be really helpful in that way too, that lyrically, it can be used for communication, for understanding, for all of that, and even for identity formation, and just kind of having a deeper understanding of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree because I would say, for example, the first connection I had with exactly what you're saying would have been around the would have been closer to the early '90s, where there was kind of like grunge music became the big thing, the Seattle grunge scene,
Hmm.
with Nirvana,
Nirvana,
and
yeah.
right, a lot of people resonated with Kurt Cobain.
Hmm.
And on the other side of it, also at the same time, you had rap music and that really, really started to hit with people in like late '80s, early '90s, like NWA, things like that, where it captured the urban experience in ways that people outside of urban areas didn't quite understand. It
Hmm.
kind of humanized it in a way while still making it entertaining. And so I think that's an example of like two groups that felt like uh, they could really connect with these musicians, and it's almost like somebody put their thoughts and articulated into lyrics, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's why so many people connected. Again, like up in the Pacific Northwest, because I lived there for like 10 years, and
yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a grunge scene up there, around there, Portland and all that, all those areas there, like Pearl Jam, MXPX, so many bands like that, where there's definitely
Right.
like this regional flavor to it, but it transcended it because it would affect people on the East Coast, with just the sound, the lyrics, and all
Hmm.
that, and so yeah, and I have to imagine like if you get someone even older than me, and they're gonna say, "Well, back in my day, might be the Beatles." My dad's a
Yeah.
Beatle maniac, so yeah, it's just different strokes for different folks, but the end result is the same. It's this really
Mhm.
strong influence, and
Right.
you know, like I hate to bring this up because it's a common topic in what we're talking about. He's talking about Chester Bennington, and see, Stone Temple Pilots was my favorite band ever, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, before Chester Bennington, my guy Scott Weiland had passed away,
Hmm.
and I'm just grateful I got to see him live at the Hollywood Bowl,
Oh,
when he was
wow.
still with STP, and
Yeah.
there is an unfortunate connection to Kurt Cobain with death by suicide. Do you feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel for people who might be going through suicidal thoughts right now? And what are some ways that you think um, that they could use music? If we have someone listening right now, what's a way, an application that you feel like they could use music to kind of just get out of that dark place?
Hmm. That's a really good question. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind, because we're talking about different genres, different performers and whatnot, is what matters most. is actually the individual's preference. Right. So people, I get that question a lot. Like, well, what kind of music should my kid be listening to, for instance? Like, I'm kind of afraid of like the emo scene because, I feel like these people have these dark thoughts and whatnot if they're drawn to that naturally. So what should I be exposing either myself or my children to or whatever? Because I don't want them to go down that path. And actually, it has really not much to do with genre. What matters more is the person's preference, because you have to enjoy what you're listening to. So that's the first thing that came to mind. The other thing is just being very intentional about, kind of what it is that you're listening to. So if someone is having suicidal thoughts, listening to songs with those themes likely is only going to enhance those thoughts, right? Which I know kind of contradicts a little bit what I said earlier, how it can feel very validating and whatnot. That also reminds me of another quote that I thought of. Again, don't remember where I read it, who said it. Wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. But it was a quote that said something like, pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. Now, granted, because we work in the mental health field, we know that's not always necessarily 100% accurate. It's not totally true. Um, but with that in mind, there are things you can do to try to improve your own mental health. So, listening to songs that make you feel good, that make you feel validated, make you feel understood. Um, I know for me and my friends, it's going to concerts together because then that becomes a social activity. Now, in this economy, I know that's not always doable, right? Because concert tickets aren't exactly the cheapest thing in the world. So it's not always doable for everybody, and that's okay. Um, but just being very intentional with how you're engaging and interacting with music, and also recognizing that although it is a wonderful coping skill and a communication mechanism and all of that, it's not the only one. So, I do a lot of presentations around college campuses about music and mental health. And actually, it's interesting that you bring up Kurt Cobain because one of my last slides, when I'm giving those types of presentations, has pictures of Kurt Cobain, Chester Bennington, Avicii, other musicians that are unfortunately no longer with us, whether self-inflicted or not, or accidental or not. And the truth is, if music was enough, those people would still be with us. So it's important to realize, yes, it's a wonderful coping skill. I will always encourage people, listen to music, have fun with it, dance, do what you need to do, but understand that there are other aspects of mental health and other coping strategies that are just as important, sometimes maybe even more so important. But, doing things you enjoy, pleasurable activities, spending time with friends and loved ones, socialization, really taking care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, all of that plays a role. So as much as I would love to sit here and say, no, just listen to music, it'll be fine. You do need a little bit more than that. Music is just a tool. And if you really want optimal mental health, you need quite a few tools.
No, I think you said that perfectly because that's the very thing. It's a tool. Well, you never fix a car or a truck with just one tool, right?
Right.
There isn't like some magical wrench that does everything. It's the whole, the whole person, it's like the whole person care, if you will. And like in music, it's well, the great thing about it, because you give the example of going to concerts, and yeah, it could get pricey and all that. And I know in a prior podcast we covered like social media and things like that, but I've noticed something with social media now, and it was kind of there a little bit in the old days of MySpace, for the kids that remember that, where remember like you could have music playing on your
Yep.
profile. Of course, some people overdid it. They had like so many things going on, it was freeze up your computer. But like nowadays, you can have music playing in your posts. You can make videos, like I know like with TikTok and all that, that's literally how it started, kind of like doing like music with like short content,
Hmm.
and all that. And in a way, it kind of makes you like one with the music in a way. So it gives people this other avenue to use music as a form of self-expression. And again, it doesn't have to be because they're in a sad mood. It could actually
Right.
be because they're in a really happy mood, and they're in a much happier mood now, and they want the world to see it. They can have this song playing and over a montage. Like people do this a lot where they go on vacation. Um, for me, it's more like food pics, and I just put music to it. But but it's your way of showing the world this is how I felt, and this was the song that I think captures it really really well. And I think there's a strength in that, and a creativity that I don't see any downside to it at all. And unfortunately, or I don't want to say unfortunately, but sometimes when they're down, I mean, they'll play some sadder music too. But like we've established, if it's used to kind of process those feelings, because
Hmm.
you're not a wordy person, so I don't know. I'm saying this is me, but I think it's a lot of men too, and but I do think our this new generation of men are getting better at it. Like some men, like for me, the way I was raised, we don't talk about ourselves a lot in the terms of like our hurt, our
Right.
our frustrations, things that we just we bottle it up until it becomes an ulcer. And then, uh, but we never thought about it much. But yeah, we might escape through music or something like that, but we don't have any other like outlets other than like some people would be drinking, which is
Hmm.
I do not recommend. Um, but like nowadays though, not only is there more encouragement to talk about it, but yes, with music, there's more outlets beyond just being like you said earlier, like a consumer of music.
Right.
Now, you don't have to be skilled with instruments to be able to do stuff like that. Like I mentioned, you could, create videos. You could do stuff like that where maybe if this was 15 years ago, no, you needed expensive editing tools. You needed all this. Now it's a free app, right? That's crazy to me, but that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I hope people utilize it for its positive qualities. But if it is something that kind of keeps them in a negative space, is like you said, like hopefully they have other tools, like
Yeah.
a strong support system. I think is helpful, and obviously
Absolutely.
not to sound self-serving, but going to therapy would definitely help. To have just have another person that you can sound off on about what's troubling you, how you want to improve your life, things like that. Having good friends, and just I think in general having choices to
Yeah.
do things. Because I get it. Sometimes people feel trapped, like they don't have
Hmm.
choices, and at least music is a choice they can make. Like, I mean, once again, I'll date myself on this one, but like if you didn't have money to go to Blockbuster Music or the Warehouse back in the day to buy the album or the single you wanted, you really had to wait on the radio with your finger on the record button, or you hit record but then you hit pause to like, because that's a
Hmm.
little nifty trick, and then
Yeah.
boom, you hit it when it comes on, and you hope the DJ doesn't talk too much, right?
Right.
uh, when you record it. But that could be nerve-wracking as it is. And so now it's so easy. You have information, you have entertainment at your fingertips. You can download it. I mean, even YouTube lets you download stuff now, so you can play it offline when you're on a plane or whatever, right? If you have a
Hmm.
connection. And so I hope people recognize those choices they have to be able
Right.
to do those really great things. Because I know I get it when you're born into it and you're like, it's always been like this. Some of us remember when it was really hard, you
Right.
know? So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Now you bring up, Blockbuster Music and all that. I remember walking into like Tower Records and what was the other one? Sam Goody back in the day.
Oh,
And
Sam
they
Goody.
had those
Yeah.
listening stations and people would put on their little headphones and just hang out there listening to music because maybe they didn't have a way to do it at home. And that's another one of the things that I look at a lot when I do these music and mental health presentations is how over time accessibility to music has just increased so much. It's really exploded what with streaming and all that. So we're at a time in our lives right now where it's more accessible than it's ever been. And granted, I'm talking about recorded music, not necessarily live music, because I feel like that's maybe financially a little less accessible than it has been in the past.
But you know what?
Um,
I will say this: the music industry, they've kept up pretty well, because I remember during the pandemic, there was no public events and all that, and I remember I actually attended a Stone Temple Pilots online only concert. They even send you like this little funky digital ticket stub and all this stuff, and you see a live like performance. Hey, it was the best we could get during that time. You make do with what you
right.
got, right? But it was cool though. I mean, it was during work. I mean, well, it's all right. None of my bosses are listening. They don't care. But like, it made the time go by real quick. I'll just say that. But so they keep on top of that, and I'm glad. And yeah, I think music is one form of pop culture that they just kept up really well. I remember like when I was like a sophomore in college, I was in the dorms, and I remember my roommate and I, who's still my best friend to this day, we knew a guy down the hall, where this guy made so much money just burning CDs for people because he would go like it was a LimeWire and all that, get all these songs on MP3, and then he'd sell you this CD. It's got a bunch of songs on it. I'll tell you something, like you bet brought like Tower Records, because yeah, we would take the shuttle to Tower Records, but like, come on, I mean, I didn't have money back then. I'd be lucky at one album, But now I could get like hundreds of songs. This guy charged like $5, right, for a CD. I mean, you had to
Yeah.
wait a day. You had to wait a day for him to burn it, but that was like, to me, I was like, only one day? Oh my God. Now it's like a minute and it's all there,
Yeah.
right onto your phone. But
Hmm.
my whole thing was, I was used to like, again, that freaking radio method of recording. Now this guy gets me the CD and I've got like all these MP3s on there. My world was like blown. And we're just, and my roommates had like a surround sound system, so we were jamming, man. And
Hmm.
we had so many genres, it got you through every single mood. Because
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way really until you articulated like that. I was just like, hey, this is really cool, but subconsciously, I think it did way more for me. Because sometimes I would be like, man, I want to hear some like some grunge. I want to hear some like SDP, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, or whatever. And some days I just be like, no, man, let's throw some like like Naughty by Nature on or something like
Yeah.
that. And so yeah,
Yeah, and
it
it's
was
true.
really
To
cool.
this day, I even have like I now have Spotify playlists for every mood, right? If I need to do something or if I want to feel a particular way or really like tap into an emotion, I have
Hmm.
different playlists for different purposes.
Yeah, I think that's really smart too, because one thing I could do a better job on is doing a gym playlist, because
Mm,
by the time I get there, then I gotta like sort through stuff. And again, as I'm talking about this, I have no excuse for why I haven't already done it, because I hate taking my phone out when I'm between sets, but then it'll play something really not suitable. Like, like
right.
it'll go from like high energy stuff to suddenly like, I don't know, like Barry Manilow or something. And I'm like, wow, this is killing my flow right now. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I got to put that on my to-do list. Actually create a real playlist.
Highly recommend it. I have one for when I go roller skating, because yeah, there are some songs that are better to move to than others that are going to keep you more motivated, more upbeat. So yeah, definitely recommend that.
Roller skating, you say, huh? Wow, that
I do say.
man. I haven't. Wow, I haven't even like thought about roller skating since
You
like,
talk about 80s, right?
oh, I
Seems
do.
appropriate.
I never roller skated. I certainly never rollerbladed. I had an accident once, and I'm not going to go into
Oh no.
the details, but I'll just say one rollerblade went east, one went west, and
Yikes.
yeah, I didn't walk right for a week on that one. But I retired from rollerblading after one session, and yeah,
Wow. That's unfortunate.
that's just how it was. Yeah, but wow, roller skating though, yeah. Ooh, I think that goes beyond the 80s. I think we're going back to like, well, like the 50s with those diners where like
Right.
yeah, wow. Okay. Interesting. I know like before we talked about, the possibility of doing pop culture on one episode, but I think we'd agree that's a lot of stuff, just with music. We've already covered a lot of ground. But even beyond that, there's so many other things, books, movies, you
Hmm.
name it. And then of course now people have podcasts, they have short content on social media or on YouTube and all
Right.
that. So many things that people can connect with. And much like music, I mean, most of it could probably be good, some of it probably not so much. But nothing's ever 100%, right? I mean, it's always going to be something that's going to have detrimental effects if applied the wrong way, let's just say,
Right.
right? You know, um, but yeah, I think with music, I hope also like people that may not know it, like, or musicians who may not know it, rather. I hope they take some ownership. I mean, in a good way, of knowing that their lyrics, their beats can have this effect on people, and they really own it, and they realize that like if because like we've said, you mentioned like Chester Bennington, like I we know musicians, entertainers, they can go to a dark place sometimes, and that
Yeah.
people the public doesn't
Right.
see, right? But I hope that at the very least they have moments where they know that their music touches people, and that it is a tool that might have saved a life, right?
Mhm.
Because even if it saved one life, right, to know that you had a hand in saving that person, like taking them back from the brink. That's a
Hmm.
huge thing. It's a huge responsibility that I'm sure they didn't sign up for, but nevertheless, they had that influence on someone. And I
Yeah.
think that's a great thing.
I think so too, and I imagine it must feel pretty rewarding as well. I think about it in terms of mental health. The reason I got into this field, other than, Dr. Scratch and Sniff, like we talked about, is because I just wanted to help people. And I remember just saying, before I got licensed, before I even started grad school, just when I knew that that was what I wanted to do, I remember saying, if I could just help one person, like, that'd be enough for me. Hopefully I've helped out a lot more than that. That's the goal. But I remember
Hmm.
saying that very early on, like, if I could just help one person, I'll be happy. That'll be enough. Um, and, obviously we do that through therapy in our field. But I think about it from the perspective of these musicians, these performers that, they didn't necessarily go in with the goal of helping someone's mental health. Maybe some did, but that doesn't seem to be like the main draw, the main pull of why people pursue careers in music. But to know that they've had that, potentially had that influence on someone and may have saved many lives, I imagine that must be a pretty rewarding experience. A lot of responsibility for sure, but pretty rewarding nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure. It's like one of those things where, like, let's say, you were a young musician, you got into it just because you had a talent for it, you had a passion for it. You probably aren't thinking about that. You're not thinking about anything other than just, yeah, hey, someone put a microphone in front of me. That's cool. But
Hmm.
along the way, I have to imagine, especially if your music is deeply personal, right?
Yeah.
On some level, you have to know that there's someone that's listening to your music that they may not be going through the exact same thing, but it's deeply personal to them for the reasons we mentioned earlier. They read the lyrics and they're just like, somebody took my thoughts and put them onto a lyric sheet somewhere
Hmm.
and sang it like really well. Because not everybody is wordy, just like not everybody is artsy. They can't draw, they can't do this, but that's why sometimes um, they look at artwork and they see something that other people don't. Well, in this case, they're
Right.
listening to something, hearing something that other people don't, right? Um, and so I think at some point that's got to hit the musician, especially the ones like who write their stuff, where it's
Right.
really, really personal, right? And that's not to diminish vocalists, because let's be real, some songs they take on a whole different meaning when it's a different vocalist. Like we mentioned
Oh,
U2
for
earlier.
sure.
Like I love that song One. And I know it was deeply personal to the band when they wrote it because they were going through some turmoil. But when you listen to the version of that song by Mary J. Blige, it takes on an entirely different meaning, right? Like,
Hmm.
so that's what I mean. Where two
Yeah.
really good songs, but you take something out of it, and that's beyond the lyrics. The lyrics are the same, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, man, I will fight anyone who disagrees with me on that one. Like, it is such good songs, but like one is more haunting, one is like redemption, and it's so upbeat. And her
Mm.
vocals, like, it reminds me of like that meme, that Disney meme where with it says like Disney to was it Phil Collins saying like, hey, we need to make us a song for Tarzan, but like don't go too hard. And it's just the guy on the piano, it's on fire, because he
Yeah.
went so hard on it. It's like they told that to Mary J. Blige, like, hey, just take it easy, don't outshine Bono. She's like, okay, and she just completely blew the roof off. I've
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like that,
I
and
don't think
it's
I've
like,
heard her version. I'll have to check it out. But you're right. Some
oh,
performers, some singers really do bring a certain vocal quality that I've always said you can almost feel the emotion in their voice.
mhm,
Obviously, I've already mentioned I'm a huge Backstreet Boys fan, but AJ McLean, he wrote a song about his father that he put on his solo album that was only released in Japan. But you know me, super
interesting.
fan. I found a way to access the album, of course. So anyway, the lyrics were just incredible, and I feel very fortunate that I actually got to see him perform that song live from the front row. And he was crying, I was crying. I think most people were crying just listening to him sing that song because it's not, in that case, in this particular one, it's not just about the lyrics. Like you said, you can literally feel the pain in his voice it was already prevalent in the recorded version, but the live version just brings it to life. And when you connect with the lyrics like that, um, and there's this additional layer, it takes the whole experience to the next level. It's amazing.
Yeah. You're the only person I can think of that refers to herself as a super fan, yet she's still being modest. For people who don't know, Dr. Lori here inducted the Backstreet Boys, actually inducted them publicly onto the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Now that is bonkers. So there's like fan, super fan. I think you're somewhere like on another planet at this point. That
Yeah,
is
and I actually
that is
kind of
heavy.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, and I kind of say that phrase or that term in jest because it's definitely not one that carries like a positive connotation for most people, I think. Um, but the way I look at it is if you're drawn to something, that something is healthy and it brings positive things to your life, then what's so bad about that, And I actually have been called a super fan in a very derogatory, demeaning way by someone who worked in the music industry, not a musician, but someone who kind of worked for some of my favorite musicians. And I know it was meant to be offensive. And that it brings a whole other element to the conversation that it's like, why do people get looked down on for being a fan when it clearly helps them accomplish some really great things? And of course, the context that I was called that was obviously in relation to the Backstreet Boys. Yet I've used their music in sessions with clients. I'm thinking about one client in particular years ago who lost a family member that she was very close with and was grieving. And, she similarly came from a background where emotions were not okay. You don't talk about it, right? And she was having a really hard time coping with this stuff. And there's a song that was written by Kevin Richardson from the Backstreet Boys about his
My
father who
my
passed
my
away.
my, my favorite Backstreet Boy, by the way.
Solid choice. But yeah, he wrote a song about his father who passed away. And the lyrics are just so real, so raw, so filled with emotion. And when my client was telling me about what she was experiencing, it immediately made me think of that song, not just because I love them, of course, and I love the song, but because what she was saying just matched so well lyrically with what Kevin had written. So I played it for her, and she just was bawling in a good way, though, because those were, again, emotions that she had suppressed, right? And so she was able to bring those up to the surface to really process them. And by the end of our work together, she had really healed a lot from that loss. And clearly it still hurt. It's not like it didn't hurt anymore, but she was in a much healthier place. Um, and of course, I'm not going to get into details or anything, but let's just say she was in a much healthier place than when I first started working with her. Just being able to connect that song made such a difference, such an impact. And I was able to bring that song in because I was a super fan, right?
Yeah.
And clearly it helped someone significantly. So that's kind of why I kind of use that term in jest because it's kind of used as a criticism. And yet, if you're really passionate about something, and this extends
Yeah.
beyond music, of course, we can look at it from like sports or whatever, right? Like there's a lot of super fans in sports.
Yep.
But if you really connect with something so passionately that you're bringing good into the world and experiencing good as a result, why is that a bad thing?
I 100% agree. And I think it's like with anything else. It's whether you're into music, you're into comic books. Like look at Comic
Yeah,
Con every year in San Diego, right? People dress up. They but they do it as a almost like a tribute most of the time. I don't think being a super fan, as like let's use it in the worst sense of the word. For example, like I don't think it's bad until
right,
it becomes where you have no other meaning in your life, maybe.
right.
I think it becomes bad if it's pure escapism. You know,
Hmm.
like again, maybe like I use the example of like Comic Con, for example.
Hmm.
Again, a lot of these people like they may go like once a year, and it gives them a chance to play dress up other than Halloween. But then there's also people who may and I think this is really unfortunate where maybe they grow up in a household where creativity and having a personal identity is really, really not an option.
Right.
Maybe it's just really, or maybe it's a little bit of their growth is stunted because they were too sheltered or whatnot, right? and then they might gravitate, or trauma sometimes causes that. They gravitate towards an identity that is so different, right? Whether through music, whether through the arts, whether through media, whatever, right? And that becomes their escape, but it also becomes their reality. Now that could be a problem, right? That
Yeah.
could be a
And I
problem.
think that goes with anything. Anything in
Sure.
excess can be detrimental, you know.
Yeah. And
Um,
and
but kind of go ahead.
no, I was just saying that's why I think it's so effective using music and things like that. Anything that motivates you and stirs up
Hmm.
creativity in you as a tool versus like
Yeah,
the only thing. And I think
right.
that's something you touched on earlier, where it has to be different things. It can't shut. It's not like music is the one thing, and it ain't like in. I think it was the second. Was it? Yeah, second Bill and Ted, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, where they literally like changed the world by playing like that song by Kiss, and it's like, yeah, okay, that was an exaggeration, like they bring
Yeah,
world peace and all that. Not
right.
quite like that, but I do think some people, if used to excess, where it's like that becomes this new reality for them, then and they cut themselves off from other choices. Yeah, that can
Yeah.
be a bit of a problem. Now,
Oh,
happily,
absolutely.
happily, I,
Uh,
I don't think that happens as often as the positive, like what you're describing. I think that where people could use it in a positive way to kind of uplift themselves, or not even just uplift, but just do what they do, but even better, like going to the
yeah,
gym. And if, hey, man, if listening to like Megadeth gets you an extra 2 reps, totally
go
worth it.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. As long as it
agreed.
doesn't work too well and now you have like a torn pec, you know? But
Yeah.
yeah. Or maybe some people would still say it was worth it. So, hey, anything for that PR, anything for that record, So yeah,
Right.
yeah. So like I said, I think sometimes, and I only bring up that example just to kind of just show the other side of it. But the reality is, there's no 100% thing that works every time.
Absolutely.
Maybe Sex Panther cologne from Anchorman, but like 60% of the time, every time. But other than that, no, something's always going to have a failure rate because it doesn't resonate with some people. Like you said, 2% of the population doesn't like music. I don't know. Maybe they like spoken word. I don't know. I'm not sure what they're into then, but um, or just they were surrounded by bad music and their choices were awful. Maybe they
Yeah.
wanted Backstreet Boys, but they got O Town or 90 Degrees instead, or No Mercy.
Could
So
be.
yeah,
Who knows? I mean, I didn't look into it that specifically, but yeah, you're right. There's nothing that's totally foolproof.
I always thought of as entertainment, but I never thought of as a therapeutic tool. And I hope that
Mhm.
some of our listeners actually be able to get something out of it. And actually, I really hope now if our listeners have their go-to songs, maybe this will inspire them to be like, you know what, let me really really look into the lyrics, right? Let me
Right.
really really dive into it, like especially if it's a song that for some reason you find yourself listening to over and over. It's on every
Yes.
playlist, right? Well, maybe there's
Right.
a reason for that, and maybe it's worth looking into, and you might discover something about
Yeah.
yourself.
Right. And you actually do bring up a good point because I remember back when I was a little lowly trainee back in the day, right? So before I got licensed, before I started kind of doing this on my own, I remember I was in a training with a music therapist. And let me just be very clear, I'm not a music therapist. I'm a psychologist who integrates music into her practice. But there is a whole field dedicated specifically to music therapists, or music therapy, I should say. So I was in a training years ago with someone who actually is a music therapist, and I remember her saying, or she had asked us ahead of time to identify our favorite song, and she brought it in with the lyrics printed out and everything. And the point she made was, there's a reason this is your favorite song. So if you think about it, you'll be able to identify that reason. And I remember looking at it and I was like, no, like this song has nothing to do with anything currently going on in my life. Like this isn't a thing. I just like it because it has a really good melody, really good beat, whatever. Like she's wrong about that. And then years later it clicked. And I was like, oh my God, she was so right. So, I again, similarly, I don't think it's foolproof. I think there's always going to be exceptions, but for the most part, I do agree that you're right. If there is a particular song that you're drawn to and you find yourself listening to over and over, or is your favorite song, there may be a reason for that. It might be worth exploring.
Actually, now that you mentioned, I'm gonna have to explore it deeper because most people who know me know my favorite song ever was "Interstate Love Song" by Stone Temple Pilots.
Great one. I
I
love that song.
I have to look into it now. I always go to that. I always go back to that song, but
I love it.
I know the lyrics and all that, but I've never tried to apply it to my own life.
Hmm.
I should probably start. But I don't even know why I said that because now people are gonna look that song up and they're gonna make this guy's fucking batshit crazy or something. But wow. But no, I'm gonna look into it now. I don't know. I hope I don't hate what I find out, but you are right. I mean, because there's a reason we go back to it,
Hmm.
and it's a reason we say that's my favorite one. It's my favorite one.
Yeah,
Of all the freaking songs, that's the one that stands out.
yeah.
I
And it
think,
took me a few years to figure out why that was my favorite song. And when it finally clicked, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. But yeah, it's interesting.
yeah. Okay, well, listen, I want to thank you again for coming on, Lori. And this was a really interesting topic, and I think I told you this. When we first talked about just the topics for this podcast, like this wasn't one of them, and you brought this to my attention. That's why I was like, "Damn, that's better than the shit I came up with." This is really cool, and that's why again I think we talked about like let's break it up because
Hmm.
with the pop culture stuff, it's now it covers other stuff. But just
Right.
covering music alone, we got our hour in on this one, and I feel like we could do another hour if we were so inclined. But it was
Probably.
really, yeah, it was really awesome. I hope you'll come on again in the future.
Sure.
I'm sure with this topic, people they can't wait for the next one, um, yeah, just thank you again for coming on. I'm glad that we initially got to connect to as a consultation, but I'm also glad it led to this podcast appearance. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Okay, you guys, we'll see y'all next time. And, you guys feed us topics, anything you guys want to hear about, send it to us in the comments, and we will definitely try to accommodate unless it totally stinks. All right. Thank you, everybody.